And now let's head over to London, where Juliana Olayinka is standing by to tell us what's happening in the UK. Good afternoon, Juliana. Let's begin our conversation with the latest data showing the UK's PMI slumped to 12.9 in April, and that's the worst reading since markets started recording this data more than 2 decades ago. How does this speak to the manufacturing and non-manufacturing sectors?
Well, pretty badly, and we've seen recently, I think it started in China, wasn't it? We got the first taste of what these lockdown measures would do with their crippling PMI figures. We've seen some pretty bad numbers across the continent, so there was no surprising, really, that PMI would be so abysmal here in the UK. Basically, since businesses have been closed and social distance measures have been put into place, it has crippled any sort of economic activity here in the UK. If you think that 50 being the benchmark for a decent PMI number, for it to fall as low as 12.9 is really bad, very shocking. The Confederation of British Industry, they're one of the largest business groups here in Britain. They conduct their own surveys, and just an hour after these PMI figures came out, they came up with their own index about the manufacturing industry. And for the 3 months to April, they had recorded the lowest output since they started their records. Of course, as well, Britain is very much a service industry that contributes the most to their economy, and the PMI figures for services fell to 12.3, and that was from a 36.9 in March, so constantly breaking records. It's incredibly worrying. I think one of the reasons why it didn't really shake the markets as would have been expected is because, you know, this is staring everybody in the face, and it's not just hitting Britain, it's hitting Nigeria, it's hitting every economy across the world. So it hasn't exactly shaken the markets any further than it would have. And there is some optimism, I suppose, a little bit of subdued optimism, because at least there will be light at the end of the tunnel. And once these lockdown restrictions are removed, then these PMI figures can slowly start building back up again. I think some are hoping that this is the worst that it will be.
Well, we do hope so too, but I'm sure many would like to know how this has affected the markets. Tell us how the numbers are digesting the latest PMI figures.
Well, like I said, we opened in the red slightly. We didn't see much of a move on the FTSE when these numbers were released at about 9:30 this morning. As soon as the CBI released those figures about manufacturing, the FTSE fell about 0.01%. But at intraday, the FTSE all-share is up slightly by 0.03%. The FTSE 100, that's down 0.85%. And the FTSE 250, the domestic market, is up by 0.85%. In currencies, the pound is up on the dollar by 0.28%, up on the euro by 0.66%, and up on the Japanese yen by 0.11%.
Well, the government now is facing pressure to give businesses hope after a warning that social distancing could last for the rest of the year. Are there signs that policymakers could change their minds on the social distancing timeline?
In England, no. I just been listening to the First Minister for Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, who, of course, is running a devolved government, but still has to answer to Westminster a little bit. And she, for the first time, has started talking about removing some of these lockdown measures. And she was pretty tough in the beginning, saying that that was not in her thinking at all. The most important thing was saving lives. But because her daily briefing happens a little earlier than the briefing that we receive in England, she has given a hint. But to go back, Professor Chris Whitty, the chief medical officer here in England, yesterday during the daily coronavirus briefing, he did say that there is no chance that people, especially in England, will be going back to the life that they lived before the lockdown until there is a vaccine. And even though today a vaccine is being trialled on 150 healthy people in Oxford, it's not going to be ready, even if it's a success, until at least September, and then there are certain things that they will have to do. So we're not expecting there to be a vaccine available this year, and we don't expect people to go back to work and to life as the way they knew it before. There will still have to be some sort of social distancing measures, which means there can be no overcrowding and no gathering. This has become particularly worrying, especially because, of course, Prime Minister Boris Johnson was nearly fatal with coronavirus. And there are some suggestions that because he felt the impact of the deadly virus so closely, he is very, very concerned about letting people back on the streets again. And even though a lot of people are talking about the crippling economy, we did have those comments by Andrew Bailey, the new governor of the Bank of England, and he agreed that if, the government decides to let people out of these restrictions too early, it could have devastating consequences on the economy. So there's certainly no end to lockdown, or at least social distancing, for a very few months, I would say, Bissy.
Thank you, Juliana, for those updates. Let's all keep staying safe.
Thank you.